Don't regret old age. 3 life-changing decisions to make now. When a person reaches the age of 80, life is often likened to a kite in a strong wind. Difficult to control. This is a truth that we cannot deny, even if we sometimes don't want to face it. As time goes by, the body gradually weakens, and our role in society also changes. Therefore, the elderly need to meticulously prepare for their old age. This preparation is not only a responsibility to oneself, but also a concern for family and descendants. By doing so, we can face life's changes and challenges with greater calmness and peace. This is the key to enjoying a full, happy, and complete old age. Arranging posthumous affairs and distributing assets to descendants. Life is a continuous flow, like water that never returns. Lao Tzu once taught, all things are born from the Tao, and then return to the Tao. Ultimately, whether we live 100 years or just a few decades, everything will return to dust. This reality, whether we want it or not, is inevitable. Mr. Vu, an 85-year-old man in my neighborhood, is a vivid illustration of this rule. He was always healthy and lucid, but one ordinary morning, he suddenly passed away after an accident while exercising. When the news of his death was announced, his children rushed back from everywhere, not only to arrange their father's funeral but also to Zheng Zhan Tai San. Initially, they met in tears, sharing memories of their beloved father. Ms. Mai, his daughter, choked up as she recalled, every morning he would drink tea and sit on the porch, looking out at the flower garden. He also loved to chat about life and people's stories. However, after these warm exchanges, the family atmosphere quickly changed and became tense. Mr. Hung, the eldest son, spoke up, full of frustration. This is not fair. I am the eldest son. I have taken care of my father for so many years. I should inherit the largest share of his assets. Ms. Lan, the second sister, was equally assertive. You can't say that. I was closest to our father. I took care of him for every meal, every sleep. I also deserve my share. But Mr. Min, Mr. Vu's youngest son, spoke with a worried expression. My life is much harder than yours. I need this money to take care of my family. Am I to suffer a disadvantage? Each person presented their own reasons for claiming a larger share of the assets, and no one would yield. The argument grew increasingly fierce. Mr. Hung insisted, the eldest son must worship the ancestors. This is tradition. Ms. Lan retorted, but I have worked hard. I deserve compensation. Mr. Min argued back. What are you talking about? My life is difficult. I need support. You all can't be so selfish. The family atmosphere gradually became heavy. The previous harmony now just a thin veneer. Finally, they took each other to court to find a fair way to divide the assets. Confucius once said, at birth, human nature is good, but when greed arises, people easily forget their inherent goodness. The asset dispute not only fractured family relationships but also ignited hatred and suspicion that could not be erased. This once close-knit family was now in turmoil. Harmony replaced by endless quarrels. Ms. Mai sadly said after the court session, I only wanted my father to rest in peace. But now, it's too late. Perhaps, in this society, each of us is racing against time, against assets, against life, forgetting that in the end, all are just external possessions. Lao Tzu taught, those who do not prepare can hardly achieve peace. Arranging posthumous affairs is a necessary act, not only for oneself but also for the family. To avoid unnecessary disputes, why should the elderly arrange their posthumous affairs in advance? The reason is very clear. The older one gets, the weaker the body and mind become, and judgment increasingly declines. At that point, the elderly are often in a state of confusion, unable to fully grasp important decisions. Without prior preparation, when confused, they cannot make wise decisions about their assets, and may even leave emotional scars on their descendants. 100 years in this human realm. It is talent and virtue that truly matter to leave behind. Confucius's saying echoes in my heart. If the elderly have prepared in advance, they will not have to worry about their children fighting over assets, and can pass away peacefully, without anxiety about chaos after their departure. At that time, the family will not be forced into unnecessary disputes, but will maintain harmony and love for each other. Remember that life is like flowing water. It cannot be held back. Preparing before passing away is not only a responsibility to oneself but also an act of protecting family affection. It preserves harmony and peace for future generations, allowing them to continue on their life's path without bearing unnecessary pain and conflict. Paying off debts to avoid affecting future generations. Confucius taught, "A gentleman must keep his word," for trustworthiness is the foundation of all relationships. However, in life, there are times when people make mistakes, fall into debt, and then find themselves in the rut of avoiding responsibility. The story of Mr. Tam, a father over 80 years old in my village, is a heartbreaking illustration of this lesson. Mr. Tam, once the pride of his family, suffered business losses, losing all his money and property. Debts piled up, leaving him with no other choice. Finally, he chose to end his life, thinking that when he died, the debts would also cease. But the truth was not that simple. After Mr. Tam passed away, creditors began to seek out his family, showing no mercy to his children who were still in school. An elderly creditor, his face red with anger, shouted when he met Mr. Tam's children, "Your father owed me money. You must pay it back." Mr. Tam's entire family, from his wife to his children, were bewildered, not knowing what to do. The children, who had thought that after their father's death everything would be peaceful, now faced an unimaginable burden. Ms. Lan, Mr. Tam's eldest daughter, tearfully shared, "I could have continued my studies, could have had a bright future, but now I have to quit school and start working early to earn money to pay off my father's debts." That statement was like a knife cutting deep into the listener's heart. Mr. Tam's entire family, once happy, now became victims of irresponsibility in financial management and debt. Since ancient times, it has been said, debts must be paid, whether material or spiritual. When the elderly enter their twilight years, their health weakens, and bodily functions gradually decline. They often need the care of their children. But if they still have to bear huge debts, their children will face an even heavier economic burden. Parents, having left this world, cannot expect their children to pay their debts for them. This is because children are not the ones to repay debts, but rather those who will continue life, carrying the lessons and values left by their parents. Lao Tzu also taught, "He who knows contentment is rich." The elderly, when they have aged, cannot use their age as an excuse not to pay debts, not to keep promises to themselves and to society. Avoiding responsibility is not only immoral but also leads to a loss of trust and respect from one's descendants. Children, no matter how much they love, cannot forever bear the mistakes and shortcomings of the previous generation. As we enter old age, we should cherish the honor, image, and trustworthiness we have built throughout our lives. Even in difficult circumstances, even if life is inconvenient, we cannot abandon our duty to repay debts. Paying off all debts, whether material or spiritual, is how we show respect for our family, our descendants, and ourselves, if they do not want their children to suffer the consequences of their irresponsibility. The elderly need to actively find ways to pay off their debts while still lucid, instead of avoiding or delaying. This is not just a duty but also a way to protect the future of their children, so they do not get caught in debts they do not deserve to pay. Paying debts is common sense, and the older we get, the more we need to understand this. Only then can the family continue to live in harmony. Kinship will not be fractured, and descendants will not have to bear invisible burdens from the previous generation. 3. Resolving grudges. Avoiding leaving hatred for future generations. In life, grudges are inevitable. Confucius said, "Forget the bad. Keep the good in your heart." But sometimes, unresolved grudges become a lifelong burden. The story of Mrs. Bitch and Mr. Hoang's family in my village is a clear illustration of this lesson. Recently, a disappearance shook the entire village. An 8-year-old boy named Duck suddenly vanished after school. According to his parents, after school, Duck went home with his grandmother. At that time, Duke's cousin came to play, and the grandmother gave each child a few coins to buy snacks. But when Duke's parents came to pick him up, they couldn't find him anywhere. The whole family worried, searching everywhere, but there was no sign of Duck. At this point, they finally approached Duke's cousin, but he said that after buying snacks, they both separated and went home, and he didn't know where Duck went. Finally, having no other option, the family reported it to the police. At that time, There were no surveillance cameras in the village, so the police could only go door to door, hoping to find a clue. Some villagers suspected that the child might have been kidnapped. The whole village suddenly became tense, each family holding their children close, fearing they might be the next victims. The police, after ruling out kidnapping, asked Duke's grandmother and parents if they had any feuds with anyone in the village. At that moment, the grandmother suddenly remembered an event 50 years ago. At that time, I had a land dispute with Mr. Tam, a villager. Both of us argued loudly. But thankfully, the village elder intervened, and everything settled down. The police received this information and quickly went to Mr. Tam's house to investigate. After many questions, Mr. Tam finally could not keep the truth hidden. He admitted that he himself had taken the child duck and locked the boy in the warehouse. Mr. Tam then explained, more than 50 years ago, Mrs. Bitch stole my piece of land and I hated her my whole life. But I never expected the hatred of the previous generation to affect the next generation. Fortunately, the child was not in life-threatening danger. But this incident was enough for everyone in the village to reflect. The grudges of the previous generation, whether over land or minor conflicts, can leave serious consequences for the next generation. As Lao Tzu's saying goes, hatred cannot solve problems, but only increases suffering. This story is a warning to all elderly people that grudges must be resolved before returning to dust. Do not let the animosities of the past torment yourself and your descendants later. For when one has entered their twilight years, all that remains is peace of mind, harmony in the family, and serenity when looking back at the life lived. From ancient times until now, families that leave grudges for their descendants often not only live in misery themselves, but their descendants also endure that pain. Just like in martial arts films, grudges over killing a father make entire clans live in anxiety, fleeing enemies day by day, unable to feel at ease. Ultimately, when the revenge is complete, they realize that life held no meaning beyond revenge, and they themselves destroyed themselves throughout that period. Therefore, don't leave the grudges of the previous generation to the next. Each person must resolve them on their own, if possible. If they cannot be resolved, at least don't let your descendants bear the consequences. Life and death are momentous, all other matters are trivial. When one has passed the age of 80, when the remaining days are few, the elderly must find a way to resolve the grudges in their hearts so that their descendants do not have to bear that heavy burden. So, before entering eternity, leave for your descendants lessons of forgiveness, of how to resolve all conflicts in life. Don't let meaningless grudges destroy an entire generation. Instead, build a harmonious family, where there is no place for hatred and resentment. The story of Mrs. Tu, the importance of planning for old age. Next in the video, we invite you to listen to the story of Mrs. Tu, 65 years old. A typical example showing how important it is to plan for old age to avoid risks and ensure peace and happiness. Mrs. Tu lived alone in her small house after her husband passed away. Although she had 2 children, she was always independent and took care of herself. Her son, Min, was a kind and hard-working office worker, but his income was only enough to cover basic living expenses. Her daughter, Lan, married Quan, a successful businessman, and their life was quite prosperous. Every week, Lan and Quan visited her, bringing gifts and words of encouragement, reminding her to take care of her health. Mrs. Tu lived a simple and joyful life. In the mornings, she often walked in the park near her house, chatting with her elderly friends. In the afternoons, she would go to the kitchen to prepare meals for herself. Her life passed steadily until an incident occurred. Min and his wife, Mai, were facing financial difficulties. They wanted to find a good school for their daughter, and the admission requirements stipulated having a house near the school. Overly worried about their child's future, Min came up with the idea of selling his mother's house to buy an apartment near the school for his daughter. He promised to take care of his mother, bring her to live with them, and ensure she wouldn't suffer any disadvantage. Min's offer shocked Mrs. Tu. This house was not only where she lived but also a gift from her daughter Lan, who had bought her this apartment when she decided to live alone. Mrs. Tu knew her son only wanted the best for his child, but she couldn't bring herself to abandon the place she had been attached to for so many years. One evening, Min and Mai visited her, probing her opinion about selling the house. She gently said, "You know I can live anywhere. But this house is a gift from Lan and Quan. I don't want to do anything that affects your future. Maya embraced her, eyes red. Mom, don't worry. Your health is what matters most. I will find another way for our child to get a good education without making you suffer. But Mrs. Tu could not accept that. Although she was Min's mother, she could not turn a blind eye to this major change. Finally, she agreed to sell the house, thinking it was the best way to help her children and grandchildren. But when she moved in with Min and Mai, she began to feel uneasy in her own home. The new life was not as easy as she thought. Every morning, she had to move quietly to avoid disturbing her children. Small habits in family life such as mealtimes, how to clean the house, or how to educate her grandchild began to create conflicts between her and her daughter-in-law. Her daughter-in-law's way of teaching, always indulging and never scolding the grandchild, made her feel helpless. One evening, when her grandchild didn't do homework, she couldn't tolerate it anymore and scolded the child. Immediately, Mai reacted strongly. Mom, don't interfere with how we raise our child. Both mother and daughter-in-law argued loudly, and Min, instead of intervening, sided with his wife. The words, "You're old. Don't be so nosy," felt like a knife piercing her heart. Mrs. Tu looked at the cold family scene before her and suddenly realized that, despite sacrificing her entire life for her children and grandchildren, she ultimately stood in solitude. One day, she decided to leave and seek refuge with her daughter Lan, hoping to find some warmth. But when she arrived at Lan's house, she received another shock. Mom, did you forget? You sold the house yourself to help Min. We don't have a spare room. Mrs. Tu stood stunned at her daughter's doorstep, not knowing where to go. She felt like an uprooted banyan tree, with no place to cling to. Just then, Min called to inform her that they had decided to send her to a nursing home, where she would receive professional healthcare services. Mrs. Tu understood that this was just a way for her children to shirk responsibility. That day, she was taken to the nursing home. Her children said nothing, just quietly left. She looked at everything around her, the white walls and the cold room, and tears streamed down her face. She wondered if she was wrong to give up everything for them. Would they still remember her? A sense of loneliness and despair filled her heart. The story of Mrs. Tu may be one of countless stories of elderly people whose lives in old age are not as they hoped, and whose lifelong sacrifices seem to go unrewarded. Blank. Blank. Thank you for watching today's video. The things we need to do as we enter old age are not just physical preparation but also mental preparation, helping us live peacefully and happily in our remaining years. Don't let time pass by meaninglessly. Reorganize your life, take care of your health, and build close relationships, because these things will be a solid foundation for a peaceful old age.